So now, I really didn't have a problem with drinking whiskey out of a container that looks like this versus this. But what happens when a non-whiskey drinker like myself starts taking whiskey more seriously? Will I ever be able to tell the difference between a Scotch or a bourbon, or pull out those awesome aromas that all the sommeliers can out of a Glencairn glass? But most importantly, out of 365 days, where will I rank the world's top whiskeys versus the lower ones? Let's find out as Short Guy drinks whiskey. Welcome back to Short Guy Drinks Whiskey. I'm Browdy Kimo, and we took a short break from drinking whiskey because we went to SHOT Show 2018. And if you missed that video, I'll leave a link right up here so you can check out the top 5 firearms I found at SHOT Show 2018. But let's get back into drinking whiskey with my first Scotch ever, the Glenlevit 12-year single malt. I can't wait. Just to recap where we've been so far. So we've done the Tennessee whiskey with Jack Daniels. We slid over to the Woodford Reserve to try some of that bourbon, Kentucky straight bourbon. Then we went to Knob Creek to try some rye. And then we did the Irish whiskey with Jameson. Now we're going to go to the Scotch with Glenlevit 12. It's really important, the Glenlevit number 12. And before we get into that, let me just kind of show you probably the worst map of Scotland ever. I apologize for everybody that's in Scotland. But what I'm just trying to show you here are the 4 recognized regions of Scots. Of course, has to be made in Scotland to be considered Scotch. But we have the islands of Islay here, Highlands, the Lowlands, and Speyside. So when you're looking on the label, it'll tell you which one of these 4 regions the Scotch was made in. But that's a nice place to start. The Glenlevit is made in Speyside. So this is it. This is the last of the 5 major whiskeys that we have to taste to kind of round out that whiskey taste. And tonight it's going to be all about the Scotch. Now, more specifically for this video, we're going to be focusing on single malt Scotch. And just like with Irish whiskey, I've listed some of the common characteristics that I found popping up over on the internet. And let's start here with the single. Now, the single just means one distillery. If it's blended from many different distilleries, you'll have a blended Scotch, more or less. And there's other configurations that can lead to that, but for the most part, single, just important that you know that it means one distillery. Now the second portion on here, malt, just means that it has to be made of 100% malted barley. And if you don't know what that is, basically they take those little barley grains, they water them, they get them to sprout and germinate just a little bit, and they stop it by drying it in a kiln. And we'll see how this affects the taste a little bit later on, but that's what that means. If it's a single malt Scotch, which has to be in Scotland, it has to have 100% malted barley and be distilled in a copper pot still. Next up on the list, you're going to notice that there's a difference between the steps in the distillation process. So yes, it has to be in a copper pot still, but you notice here in Irish whiskey, there is a 3-step distillation process that is normally used as compared to a 2-step distillation process. Now, it's said because of that extra distillation step that Irish whiskey is a little bit smoother. I don't know. I'll let you guys know what I think when I taste it. Next on here, you're going to notice that it is kind of the same here. They both have to use used oak barrels, whether it's bourbon or sherry, with a minimum of 3 years of aging in those barrels. We're down to the last 2 interesting facts, well, at least I think that are interesting about Scotch, and that's how they dry the malted barley and what they're allowed to put in what I thought was a very traditional whiskey. So let's talk about this here. So Irish whiskey, there is no smoke when they're drying their malted barley. It's done through natural gases, so you can actually really taste the flavor of the malted barley. And that is another reason why most people think that the Irish whiskey is a little bit smoother, right? You have that extra distillation process and no smokiness from the drying of the malted barley. Then when you're talking about Scotch, when they put it in the kiln, it really depends on what they're using to smoke their barley. For example, in Islay, they use peat. So it's going to give it a very distinctive flavor as compared to Speyside, where the Glenlevit is flavored at. Now, this is the last fact, and for a drink or a whiskey as traditional as Scotch, I figured that it would be totally traditional and not allow caramel coloring, otherwise known as E158. Because in the United States, you can't put artificial anything in your whiskey. It doesn't matter if it's Tennessee whiskey, doesn't matter if it's Kentucky bourbon, rye, nothing artificial. But yet, in a Scotch, which is so traditional, they're allowed that. Let's have a closer look at the history of the Glenlevit. Let's start off by having a look at the name Glenlevit. So the first half of it, the Glen, means narrow valley. The second half Levit is basically the river that runs through that narrow valley. You get Glenlevit. Now its actual translation means the valley of the smooth flowing one. The second thing to take note of is its location, way back in that glen, right? Super far back, very hard to get to, and it was a bootlegger's paradise. Literally hundreds of bootleggers back there, where the authorities were basically like, I don't know if we want to go back there. It's far, terrain's kind of weird, and if we get back there, we're going to be outnumbered. So they pretty much left them alone. Now let's fast forward to 1823, where the Excise Act of 1823 made it legal for smaller distilleries to distill whiskey. Gregory Smith, the founder of Glenlevit, was the first to cross over and pick up one of those licenses to make it legal for him to produce whiskey. Now, he was an original bootlegger, and he pissed off a lot of his bootlegger neighbors, and they threatened to burn down his distillery. So he went through a lot of hardships crossing that line, but in the end, I think he was the one that spearheaded the overall change, and a lot of people started copying the name Glenlevit. That's why I was making a big deal over them being called the Glenlevit. They had to go through a lot of trouble to get that legalized as the Glenlevit. So enough with the history, let's get into drinking. Let's crack it open. Let's hold it up to the light. That's definitely more of a yellow color, honey color, not brown. Give it a good swirl, get it on the nose. Oh wow, it's sweet smelling. I don't get a lot of burn at all. Tasting time. Oh, that's great. It's not bitter. No burn on that. All right, let's go in for the second nosing. Man, that's so sweet smelling. I don't have any alcohol burn, so that 80% proof. You know, normally when you get your nose maybe on the top or a little bit on the bottom in the glass, you get that burn from the ethanol. Nothing there, just nice, light, sweet smelling. Second taste time. Oh man. Just delicious all the way around. No burn, goes down exactly like it is, says on the bottle. Smooth, no hint of any smoke on there. Fantastic, great experience, the Glenlevit 12-year for my first Scotch. Yeah, that's definitely confirmed. The Glenlevit number 12 is my new favorite whiskey. So tune in next time where I'm going to do a blind taste test with all 5 whiskeys that I've tasted previously to see if my rookie palate can tell the difference between all 5 of them. So guys, tune in next time. It's been a pleasure, and remember, Okole Moluna. Ooh.